Imagine sitting at a restaurant, looking around at the high-end meals everyone else is eating, and then here she comes, unapologetically carrying a simple, homemade lunch. The whispers start almost immediately. Some laugh, others shake their heads. Who brings a homemade sandwich to a fancy restaurant? But what they didn't know is that this woman wasn't just any diner. She wasn't there to impress for the fancy meal, and she didn't care about their judgments. Little did they know, she was about to turn the whole room upside down. As the meal went on, the snickers turned into silence. What started as a moment of quiet ridicule soon escalated into one of the most jaw-dropping moments the restaurant had ever witnessed. What happened next would make them regret ever doubting her. You see, that seemingly ordinary lunch wasn't the real surprise. What came next would leave everyone speechless. By the time the check arrived, the staff was stunned. The woman's actions, seemingly so ordinary, would result in an extraordinary act that no one could have seen coming. And it wasn't just her meal that would leave people talking. It was the $1 million tip she left behind. But how did this all unfold? Why did she leave such an unbelievable tip? Stick around, because you won't believe what happens next. Her name was Elena. A quiet woman in her late 50s, dressed in a simple cardigan and worn shoes, she didn't look like someone who would turn heads. She came into the upscale restaurant alone, carrying a brown paper bag in her hands. While others ordered expensive steak and wine, Elena calmly unpacked her homemade sandwich and a small thermos of tea. The waiter hesitated when approaching her table, unsure if she was even supposed to be there. Some diners rolled their eyes. Others snickered behind menus. No one expected her to stay long. But Elena wasn't there for attention. She sat silently, occasionally glancing out the window, like she was waiting for something or someone. The staff debated whether to ask her to leave, unsure how to handle the situation without causing a scene. To them, she looked out of place. But there like any other guest, kindly, respectfully, she brought her water, refilled her tea without asking, and didn't once question her meal. What Sarah didn't know was that Elena had chosen this restaurant on purpose, and she had chosen Sarah too. Why this place? Why today? And most importantly, what made Elena decide that this simple act would lead to a $1 million tip? The answer was just around the corner. Sarah couldn't stop glancing at Elena's table. Something about her felt different, not in a strange way, but like there was more to the story than met the eye. While the other staff whispered behind closed doors, wondering if Elena was just trying to make a scene or sneak a free seat, Sarah trusted her gut. This woman wasn't lost. She had a purpose, and something told her this was no ordinary lunch. Back in the kitchen, the manager wasn't happy. He told Sarah to keep an eye on the lady with the paper bag. "We can't afford to have people thinking anyone can just walk in here without ordering." Dined there regularly couldn't stop staring. The wife leaned over and said just loud enough to be heard, "Some people really don't know their place." Their laughter stunned the air, but Elena didn't flinch. She simply folded her napkin and looked up, meeting their eyes with calm assurance. It was the kind of look that made you wonder if she knew something you didn't. Meanwhile, Sarah was starting to ask questions of her own. Who was this woman? Why had she come here of all places? And why did it feel like the entire restaurant had unknowingly become part of something much bigger? Yes, the lunch rush faded, and the restaurant quieted. A strange tension settled over the room. Elena remained at her table, slowly sipping from her thermos, her sandwich half-eaten. No one could figure out why she was still there. The couple who had mocked her earlier had already paid and left, but their comments still lingered in the air like an echo. The staff whispered more now, trying to piece together her story. Was she lost, lonely, or maybe rich in disguise? The theories kept piling up. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. Elena hadn't asked for anything. She never complained. She just waited. And that's what made everyone so uneasy. It was like she was silently watching them, holding back some truth they hadn't earned yet. Then, just as Sarah passed her table to check in one last time, Elena gently placed a white envelope on the edge of the table. "This," she said softly, "is for someone who didn't judge me." Her voice was steady, almost too calm for the weight of what she was doing. Sarah hesitated, confused, as Elena pushed the envelope toward her with a faint smile. And then, without another word, Elena stood up, gathered her paper bag, and walked out the door. Sarah stood frozen, holding the envelope in her hands, heart pounding. Around her, the restaurant buzzed with questions. What was in that envelope? Who was this woman really? And why did it feel like everything had just changed? Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she looked down at the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have, like it was carrying more than just paper, like it held a message that would change everything. Curiosity got the better of her. She carefully opened it behind the counter, away from the eyes of her co-workers. What she saw made her gasp. Inside wasn't just money. It was a certified cashier's check. $1 million. Real. Verified. But that wasn't all. Tucked beside it was a handwritten note, short and precise. Asterisk. For the kindness you gave without asking. You reminded me of someone I lost. Asterisk. Sarah stared at the words, confused and overwhelmed. Who had Elena lost? Why her? And how could anyone walk out so calmly after giving away a fortune? She rushed to the front door, hoping to catch Elena before she disappeared. But she was already gone. No car, no trace, just the quiet street outside and the faint sound of traffic in the distance. When Sarah turned back, the restaurant's manager noticed something was off. "What's going on?" he asked sharply. Sarah hesitated, unsure of what to say. But before she could answer, a man walked through the door, tall, in a dark suit, and clearly not a regular. Had only just begun. Sarah's heart raced as the man in the dark suit stepped closer. The restaurant, once filled with quiet murmurs, now felt frozen in time. "My mother, Elena, left something behind," he said, his eyes locked on the envelope in Sarah's hands. She held it tighter, unsure whether to speak or run, but his expression wasn't angry. It was tired, sad, even. "She's been leaving gifts like this around the country," he continued, softer now. "Not for just anyone, only for people who remind her of my sister. My sister passed away last year. Young. Kind, just like you." His voice cracked at the edges, and for a moment, the tension eased. This was her way of remembering her. "Every time someone shows the kind of warmth my sister used to give so freely, my mother leaves something behind." Sarah stood stunned, the weight of the check finally sinking in. The laughter, the judgment, the confusion, it all made sense now. Elena hadn't been lost or out of place. She'd have been looking for something good in a world that often supposed to be her last stop. Sarah's breath caught. The check, the note, the visit. What if it all meant something more? What if Elena's story wasn't over, but only just beginning? Sarah stood quietly, the envelope still in her hand, the weight of everything finally settling in. The man, Elena's son, looked out the window as if hoping to catch a glimpse of his mother one last time. But she was gone, like a passing breeze, leaving only stories and silence behind. "She always said kindness was the rarest kind of wealth," he murmured. "She believed people like you kept that wealth alive." The restaurant, once filled with judgment and noise, now felt transformed. The whisperers had stopped. The same people who laughed at Elena's simple lunch were now watching with wide eyes, unsure of how to feel. Sarah, still overwhelmed, looked down at the check. She didn't want the money for herself, not all of it. She made a quiet decision. Weeks later, news spread. A local food bank had received a massive anonymous donation. So did a struggling shelter nearby. And every time someone asked who did it, no one could say for sure. But those who worked at the restaurant knew. Sarah didn't want credit, just to keep Elena's gesture alive. Elena was never seen again. No social media, no photos, no trails. But every now and then, someone in a quiet town would tell a story about a woman with a paper bag, a kind smile, and a tip that changed everything. And in those moments, the world felt just a little bit more human. Because sometimes, the richest hearts leave the simplest lunches and the biggest marks.